Meep.
Is movie good or bad? 100 years of arguing between critics and audiences has led us to this glorious moment where we can now all clearly see that we are not even fucking close to answering that question. But does that question serve us in the first place? I've had the idea for this video floating around in my head for a while now, and I was just kind of debating whether or not it was worth it to really make, but between the Rotten Tomatoes page for the Uncharted movie, the YMS ratings controversy, the Fantano gives every Denzel Curry album an 8 controversy, and this weird Morbius tweet, I feel like this topic has now reached critical mass, and I'm gonna talk about it. I feel like the real root cause of all of these things that have been popping up that I just mentioned is really just a case of human beings loving to simplify things. We love to boil things down to their essence and make them as digestible as possible because we're lazy and thinking is hard. Ever since that piece of shit lungfish surfaced, literally everything has just continued to get worse. Human consciousness was a mistake. Like all human conceptions of life itself, it seems that the ways that we engage with art or criticism are no stranger to societal simplification. Let's go back to the Rotten Tomatoes page for the Uncharted movie for a second. How exactly did this 41% get calculated? Well, to give you the simple version, basically, if a film critic gives a film a 6 out of 10 or higher, that is considered a fresh review. If a critic gives a film a 5 out of 10 or lower, that is considered a rotten review. You take the total amount of fresh reviews versus the total amount of reviews, period, average that out, and boom, you got your tomatometer score. The entirety of the site is dedicated to boiling reviews down to was movie good or bad and barfing out a percentage based on that. It is far too simplistic and honestly just a little misleading, yes. Even if Rotten Tomatoes has an entire page on their website dedicated to explaining all this, remember, our little human pea brains don't want to do that much thinking. Thinking is hard. And no average person who isn't cannibalized by internet movie culture the way that maybe you are and the way that I definitely am, the average person is not going to read all that, and they're going to have absolutely no clue as to how all of this works.
Wow, that's a lot of words. Too bad I'm not reading them.
But let's just take the tomatometer score out of the equation entirely here for a second, because I don't think that's the biggest problem with Rotten Tomatoes. To me, Rotten Tomatoes' biggest offense is that in its attempt to simplify everything into 2 rigid categories, critics and audience, good and bad, etc., basically, in doing so, it is completely alienating the user from actively engaging with the criticism. Aside from giving tiny blurbs from the critics or generalizing the overall critical opinion into a consensus, Rotten Tomatoes is not really interested at all in allowing you to interface or otherwise engage with any of the reviews that the data is being pulled from. There is nothing personal about this at all. It is just numbers and symbols that inherently mean nothing to you. For example, can you name for me just one critic whose reviews regularly go up on Rotten Tomatoes, besides maybe Chris Stuckman or the infamous Armand White? Because I will be the first to admit it, I can't tell you a single name, and I have been looking at scores on Rotten Tomatoes for at least the past 12 years. I can't tell you any of these people's names. I can't tell you what they regularly like or dislike. I can't tell you whether or not they're engaging with the films in good faith. The singular biggest reason that YouTube has become an overwhelming hub for film criticism is because it is inherently more personal than a website like Rotten Tomatoes could ever hope to be. If you subscribed to this channel, it's probably not just because I dissected a film or a particular topic, but because I made you feel something while I did it. And the more films that I talk about, the more that you will understand my tastes and the more that you'll hopefully relate to them. And from there, that can help you maybe trust my recommendations or heed my warnings. On YouTube, you are pretty much required to engage with the actual substance of a review, at least if you want to get anything meaningful out of it and use the platform to its greatest potential. But of course, we're not just going to sit here and sniff our own farts. YouTube is not perfect, not even close. I mean, for starters, the algorithm pushes the hell out of reactionary videos, especially if those videos are going to elicit anger, which is... it comes with a whole slew of problems, one of which being that these videos are often very devoid of substance or critical thinking. And also, as of late, the algorithm seems to prioritize shorter videos, which kind of throws depthful analysis out of the window unless you are willing to make hours-long videos on the regular that people are willing to watch all the way through. Not to mention that the YouTube community often loves to just take a critic's score or rating at face value, even though, as we've already established, those scores mean nothing without the entire context of the rest of the review. And critics, in general, but also especially on YouTube, have this horrible tendency to just take the exact template that has been laid out across various screenwriting books, or Joseph Campbell's Hero with 1,000 Faces, or previous films in a series. They just take all these ideas, they take them all, and they just slap them on to whatever they're watching and just put it up against that without any regard to the filmmaker's intent, and just call that a review, which... And don't get it twisted, I am not advocating at all for anyone to just completely disregard the history of their craft's success, especially if they want to be a filmmaker or a film critic. All I'm saying is that the way in which the tools at a critic's disposal are used can make a huge difference in how said criticism is perceived. To quote the late great Roger Ebert, "It is not what a film is about. It is how it is about it." And I feel like this is true not only for films, but for film criticism as well. I am just over being invested in whether or not a critic or a conglomerate of critics has come to an overall positive or negative conclusion about a film, or any other piece of art for that matter, or whether or not that conclusion that they've come to perfectly aligns with my own opinion. I try my best to judge a review based on how that person engages with the art. Girlfriend Reviews and NakeyJakey walked away with completely opposite emotional reactions to The Last of Us 2, and I think both of their videos on the subject are brilliant pieces of analysis. Again, it is not the opinion of a critic that ultimately matters. It is how that opinion was formed and how much you personally resonate with their approach. Because sure, an opinion can't be wrong, or whatever, but an opinion can be horribly misinformed or otherwise in bad faith. Do you seriously expect me to treat a detailed and knowledgeable analysis of The Batman with the same amount of value as somebody just giving it a 0 out of 10 on Metacritic because their 6-year-old pissed themselves while they watched it? I mean, come on. This would normally be the part of the video where I summate everything into some sort of clear, concise point, but that kind of is the point, isn't it? That nothing about the way we engage with art can be perfectly condensed into a compact little YouTube video for you to consume. Art is human. It is messy, it's complicated and nuanced, and it can't be boiled down as simply as we think it can. But to make this video feel like it was worth your while, here's some final thoughts. It's important to have a nuanced take on a film and to try and engage with the film on its own terms. Don't attempt to oversimplify everything. Use your brain. Think critically. Be self-aware. Actively engage with what you consume. Make art, not content. Art is the enemy of democracy. Thank you for watching this mess. F*** you. Bye.